Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Those of you that are tuning in, it's exciting to be back. Actually, this is the Xsolla Diamond Club. This is actually one of the first of our series of sessions that we've had for the year. So this is exciting, and we're streaming it live this time. For a lot of people that usually tune in behind the scenes in our Discord, we've decided to actually do this live. So it's very exciting. We've got a great selection of wonderful people that are joining us. Justin Berenbaum, the GM of the Xsolla Funding Club, who will be very familiar to many of you. We're also joined from across the pond, Jamie Sefton, who's the MD of Game Republic and has run many game investment events in northern UK, but also all around the world. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, Guy. Jamie, for those who don't know you, I think we'll just start it off. Can you give a little kind of synopsis of what you do, what you've been doing, and all that? I mean, we all know each other, but there might be a lot of people, because you're so busy behind the scenes, there's probably a lot of people who have no idea who you are or how cool what you do is. So if you can just kind of start it off.
Yeah, sure. Firstly, apologies if you've seen the photograph of me and you're suddenly seeing, because that photograph was taken about 10 years ago. So if you're looking at this now, you're thinking, my God, he's been ravaged. What's happened overnight? So that's why.
It's been a pandemic, mate. You're good.
Yeah.
The last 2 years are dog years.
Right? More chins, etc. But so I apologize about that. But basically I've been in the games industry for goodness me, more than 20 years now. A sort of proper veteran of the industry. I joined games magazines in the late 90s, writing for a magazine called Arcade, a multi-format magazine in the UK, and then I joined lots of other magazines, Official Xbox in the UK, Official PlayStation I wrote for, and then eventually became editor of a PC games magazine called PC Zone. And I was editor for about 2 years there, and had a great time. Got to meet a lot of brilliant people, go all over the world, play games, meet your heroes. It's just it was fantastic. And then I got a job on the other side of things. So I basically got a job in helping developers in the north of England, in Yorkshire, and the north of England, get to meet the publishers and the platform holders and the people that I'd been meeting as a journalist for sort of 7 or 8 years. And I've been doing that ever since sort of 2008, 2009. I've been running Game Republic, which again is sort of business network, and it's quite straightforward, really. It's just more business for your company. That's it. And we have more than 50, 60 companies as part of the network in the north of England. And bigger companies like Sumo and Rockstar Leeds and Revolution Software, who make Broken Sword, and some really fantastic companies, and lots of young, brilliant new companies coming through. And we've got 14 universities and colleges as part of the network as well. So we have events like the Student Showcase, which is great. I love that event. We've got that happening in June this year again, and it's just fantastic to see students get placements and full-time jobs as a result of the event. So we run events in the region for the last 2 years until sort of January. Actually, it was November last year, October last year when we started having events in real life. But we moved online during the pandemic. But yeah, we had business events with the likes of Sony and Microsoft and Epic and Unity and Samsung, you name it. We get them to come up to our part of the UK, and we have business meetings. And yeah, it's all about sharing contacts and helping developers get their games out and make hopefully loads of money.
Well, that's what everybody wants, loads of money. So David, let's jump to a little bit more of we've known each other for a long time, but I want to jump to kind of where we spent quite a bit of time up until the last 2 years, of course, at least in person, were the game investment summits that you were helping to run that had both the matchmaking element as well as kind of a really compact series of talks over a day. So let's talk a little bit about what those were like, and then and then obviously the sudden panic shift to digital. And then, I'd like to do that quickly. Then I want to jump into, what my real focus for this one is that, I think a lot of people have gotten used to pitching digitally over the last 2 years. we're now going to be moving to, well, it's been hybrid, I think, for a little while, more and more hybrid, but now we're moving into DICE's next week, for those who don't know, which is the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences, big event. It's kind of a high-end executive summit. They have the DICE Awards, which are kind of like the Video Game Industry Academy Awards. That's become an in-person event. GDC is now going to be in person. I know Pocket Gamer Connects is just ending in London right now. I know White Knights had an event that was in person and fairly well attended in Berlin last week. So we're obviously seeing a shift to in-person events, which is, still, look, some people are a little concerned. I'm a little concerned. Some people aren't super concerned. I'm a little concerned, but I'm going to DICE. But we know that things are slowly progressing at a minimum to like full-on hybrid and hopefully best case scenario back to live events. I think it's good that things have gone digital because now developers can pick and choose which events instead of trying to have to go to every single event, which, a lot of them from a financial standpoint didn't make sense. They can be a little bit pickier, but let's talk about, right? Everything was in person for the most part. Almost all pitching was done in person. And that's what your event was. So let's talk a little bit about that sudden shift from the in-person to all digital, how you guys managed it, and then maybe what you saw for the differences and what you saw that was successful in developers that were successful in making the switch.
Yeah, sure. Well, as you say, the gamesindustry.biz investment summit was an event that we ran in London for many years, for more than sort of 7 or 8 years before we started to bring it to America. And that was fantastic. We brought it to Boston. First of all at PAX East, and we brought it to Seattle, PAX West, and with Guy, and it was we had a lot of fun, and the whole idea of the event is basically, in a nutshell, just to have lots of game developers and investors, publishers, anybody that can kind of help developers get their game into the market at the event. And whereas events like GDC and larger events are fantastic, you tend to be spread out over the whole of San Francisco. So you have events in hotel lobbies, you'll have at the show, you'll have it in bars, all over the place. Whereas with our event, we try and get everyone in one room, so you can kind of meet a lot of people and a lot of brilliant investors and publishers and platform holders, all in one place. And we have a few talks in the morning, and then we have meetings in the afternoon, and that was the format before the pandemic. And the last one, I was just chatting to Guy before we went on air, the last event that we did in the States of the investment summits was at PAX East in February 2020. Was right at the end of February, and
right
then
before
soon
everything
after
went
that,
boom.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, sorry, is it frozen? Are you still there and everything? Can you
I'm
see
still
me
here.
okay?
Maybe.
Yeah, cool.
Yep.
And then basically from that time, we just suddenly went into the pandemic, and everything changed, obviously, for everybody, not just as in the UK, but everybody.
So tell me a little bit about the shift, maybe, and again, I think the developers know their struggles. So let's talk a little bit about the shift from, the investors that you were talking to based on the summit and obviously what they were doing before, to maybe what they were looking for or what the expectations, if you can think of anything that changed dramatically during the last 2 years. We're trying to continue with the digital events in person. So what did you see in terms of shift from the investor side, but also like if you saw any developers make a really good switch to digital and still be able to kind of conduct these things as efficiently?
Yeah. Well, the shift was really dramatic. I mean, just as an example, we ran that event at in February, and we had, I think there was about 150, 180 people at the event in Boston. We had 350, 400 meetings. It was a great event, and it was hugely enjoyable. And then we did an event in May, and we partnered with yourselves. You're one of the sponsors, Xsolla, and we had 1,000 people attend that event from 60 countries around the world, and 1,500 meetings. So the kind of scale of the thing kind of just suddenly just exploded, and obviously everybody could attend that event from wherever they were in the world. They didn't have to, actually physically go to the space in Boston. So So that was great, and because we ran it as a free event, we wanted to sort of give something back to the industry and kind of help developers through this sort of tough kind of period during those first few months. Because of sponsorship from yourselves, gamesindustry.biz could do it for free, and we got some wonderful feedback. I remember seeing a developer I think she was in Australia, and she's saying, this is so great because I'm getting to meet the people that I need to talk to, platform holders and publishers, and I would never have been able to afford to go to GDC. It's just too expensive, and yet here we are, and I'm able to talk to these people and have discussions, and it's just fantastic. And that really kind of opened my eyes to it. And I've just been hearing a lot from publishers when we did the event, when we got back to doing in real life events. The first one was in October, and we did GI Live London, and we had Ago Simonetta there, and Ago was talking. Ago's at Thunderful now. He used to be Xbox.
Ago's super smart. Yeah, so.
Yeah, he's a great guy, and he was just talking about the fact that because of the pandemic kind of pushed everyone online, including publishers and platform holders, that he ended up signing games from South America and from other places. And he said, I would never probably have got a chance to meet those developers in real life if it hadn't have been for the pandemic. So, while obviously it's been a horrible time and it's been tough for everybody, and it's been nightmarish, there are things that have come out of it that I think can be seen as a positive, and I think that's really good. And certainly for the events that I'm running for Game Republic, just where we're doing mostly physical events at the moment, but every now and again when we can, and we'll get a speaker, say Valve from the US, which we had during the pandemic, and we spoke to them because they wouldn't usually come over to the north of England anyway. So we're going to continue to occasionally have online events where we can get speakers that wouldn't usually come to our events. So there's all sorts of kind of useful interesting lessons that I think have been learned from running events, but we're still learning, and things change as well. It's not like suddenly when we ran that event we're like, brilliant, we've sorted it. we've got an event now, or we now to run online events, because things changed. We introduced Discord into the events. We people got I think a little jaded with Zooms and got a bit sick of it, so we started to see things tail off a little bit. So
yes, the Zoom fatigue is definitely real.
Yeah. I'm amazed that people are still watching this. But no, it's so we had to change, and we had to reintroduce new things and get people excited and do more different things, like having instead of having just talks all the time, we had pre-recorded talks and then chats in Discord, and then we had live roundtables in Discord, and that seemed to really be brilliant. People loved those, and so we had to keep innovating all the time, and that's the thing, and we're still having to do that now. There's no kind of resting on your laurels. It's like you just have to keep reinventing things and making sure that you stay relevant and that people enjoy what you do.
I kind of want to jump in and just like mix this up a bit then in that respect. And like we're all three of us here have so much experience with events, and especially digital events and all this kind of stuff. But I'm hearing this a lot, where a lot of folks are like, what, there is actually an incredible benefit that came from the digital events, a massive ability to connect with people all over the world in different countries. If it wasn't for these events, I never would have, heard from these people over here. These people never would have had the chance to actually attend these kind of things. Are we in too much of a hurry to get back to physical events? Like, we've learned so much, we've done all this stuff. Like, I feel everyone's like, great, okay, we're done, now back to physical. Are we missing a trick?
Well, so I'm gonna step in here. So this is funny, and Jamie knows this. So when we originally started sponsoring the game industry events, is because we launched Xsolla Funding Club, and maybe I would like to say we're reminiscent, but that's more like I've been doing this for a long time and realized there was a huge disconnect between the number of developers that any publisher or investor can meet, even at a live show, versus the number of great developers out there that were just waiting to be discovered, had great opportunities. But look, I was doing the math the other day. Let's just say somebody now decides to go to GDC next month, and we'll just say they're from the UK. maybe they can get cheap plane tickets. I'm just going to say 2 people, $1,000 each, right? And that's, and I'm just and then you've got the hotel at GDC now. Even a cheap, crappy hotel is $400 a night. Even if they're sharing, figure 5 or 6 nights, and then and it's still, a developer has to make a decision. Do I spend literally a man-month salary for maybe 1 or 2 of us to try to attend GDC in person? Or do I find a way to do these events? And I think what we're seeing is the importance of regional events has picked up, especially the ones that are going to be live, because the ability to still, let's be honest with you, building relationships, networking in person is always still more effective than doing it online. The amount of due diligence required from an investor when I meet somebody online is significantly more difficult. And it's just harder to build trust and relationships long term. Not that it can't be done. We've proven that it can. But I think what we started Funding Club was really just for the ability of all these developers to simply apply one place and get in front of a ton of investors. And for investors and publishers, how do you find games in countries you don't travel to? We talked to a lot of these folks, even the big ones, the Griffins, the Tencents, all who Tencent has a huge staff, but most of these funds and a lot of these publishers, they only have 1 or 2 or 3 biz dev or dev relations people, right? Like, how many shows can you go to a year? How many events? And so, they're missing out on opportunities in Brazil and Taipei, and because you just physically, it was impossible to go to, even when things were perfect, it was impossible to go to all the events. So I think what we've now done is, as this move to hybrid, is seen this opportunity for developers who didn't have a chance before. We're also seeing a ton of new investors come into the space, right? I do think, though, the desire and the need for this rush to in-person is still there, because as an investor, I can tell you it is still really hard to go, okay, I've never met you in person. I've never been to your studio. I've never sat down and had a meal with you, but here I'm going to start cutting you big fat checks, right? And it's happened, and it's happened a lot, but I can tell you that process has become more difficult, and I actually feel a lot of indie developers that have never launched a game before, the process has become even more difficult because I can't meet you in person and build that relationship. That's why I do think the pure rush to in-person is going to be a problem. I think regional highlighted with big international opportunities. But Jamie, for you, what are you guys looking at now that you're moving to physical? Are you also going to be doing hybrid? Are you going to allow people who can't attend in person is there going to be a day that's just digital or some combination?
Yeah, I think going forward, I think it'd be a shame if we just throw everything out now and go back to physical. In fact, I don't think that's going to happen, because just from the point of view, like I used to speak to biz dev people at larger publishers, and they'd never be at home. They'd always be out traveling around the world, going to all these places, and it was great. They loved it and stuff. But just for work-life balance, you can't. Surely you don't need to go back to that where you're out every other week flying all over the world. There's things now that you can do rather than doing that, is have a virtual meeting, and I think that's a good thing.
There was a dev that I was talking to where they were like, I can't go to any more events. I actually have to go back and actually make the game that I'm telling everyone about. Like, they've got to find that time.
I would joke, at some point, somebody's got to actually, even if I meet a dev and I want to sign them, at some point I actually have to be in the office long enough to work on a contract and get a deal done, right? It's...
That's it, and it's... I think it's going to be messy. I think there's going to be, just from my point of view, I'm doing physical events. We're looking at doing hybrid events. We're still doing online events, online only events. The thing about hybrid and running hybrid events is it's expensive. It's like, it really increases your costs as an event organizer, because you've got to, make sure that you've got all the streaming stuff there. You've got to make sure that you've got a meeting system set up for people. You've got to do it properly. It's like running 2 events, really. And you've got to make sure that you look after the online as well as looking after the physical. So I think there will be, with the larger events, I think you'll see hybrid stuff, and I think that's great. I think that the barrier to entry is lowered, which is great, again, for encouraging more developers, and especially new indie devs who haven't got the budget to go to GDC, which it can be $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, and climbing to get out to somewhere like GDC. But it's going to be messy, coming out of this pandemic. There's not going to be a kind of cut-off point where we go, right, okay, the pandemic's over, we can get back to normal, because I think it's just going to be messy. There's going to be, a mixture of all kinds of events, really. But I think there is definitely a market out there for people that want to access online events and still go to an event like GDC, but do it from their office or from their home. And that, as I say, that's great, because it allows people from all over the world to be able to access these events. And like Ago said, he's signing games from South America and other places that, perhaps, it's in the past it's been more difficult because of language barriers and things like that. But now it's, the world's your oyster, really.
Yeah, I'd say so. Our CEO had this expression ages ago, which is, we've been lucky to sign some games early as core Xsolla, but you never know where the next great game is going to come from. And if you limit access based on, on the cost of being able to go to these shows, then there's great games from a lot of places, emerging markets. We're seeing, Africa is growing rapidly, MENA, India, a lot of these markets, South America, Southeast Asia, that didn't really have the opportunity to break into the mainstream game business. And when I say mainstream, I'm going North America and European centric, and maybe Eastern Europe, then even maybe Russia, because that's been part. But South America, and MENA and Africa in particular, and India, Southeast Asia had always been, I think, it's not what I don't believe, but like a little bit of the redheaded stepchildren. They were almost forgotten about at these big events because they couldn't afford to come. They were startups. Yeah. They didn't have the access and the opportunities. And this is the thing that I love about what's happened now, right? Is, not to get on here, but so Joystick Ventures, which is the fund that spun out of it, we've signed 5 games. None of them are from North America, right? Like they're from all over the world. And the couple of games that we're looking at even now still aren't from North America. We've looked at some games from North America. A lot of these games we might now a couple of them we found while traveling at Gamescom or whatever else. But some of these games we found digitally we would have never found before the pandemic.
Yeah,
and so that's been fantastic.
That's it. Yeah, I think Jamie, that's exactly it. I think there's. Yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead and finish. And I was going to ask a question about pitching, but I wanted you to finish that thought.
Yeah, I was just saying, it means more diverse teams. It means more, people from different backgrounds, all that kind of stuff. And as an industry, it's easy for me as a white middle-aged man to sit here and say, we need more diversity, but. We do, and hopefully it will mean in the future less people looking like me sat here.
I know now you're making me feel guilty about this, but I needed somebody who's been on the event side. So I wanted to ask you a little bit now, again, because we generally have a lot of developers and indie developers tuning into this or listening to the Fireside chats. Let's shift the focus a little bit to what you're hearing about what's effective for pitches from these developers by investors. I know you spend a lot of time talking to the investors or publishers because that's, without them, it's hard to get the developers, and it's kind of a chicken and egg thing. So I'm sure you hear a lot from the publishers and investors about kind of what they're looking for, what their expectations are. Can you kind of highlight what that was like in digital, and as we move to kind of hybrid or physical, and what I really want to focus on what developers need to do to prepare for those, because it's slightly different.
Yeah, it is slightly different, but the good thing is that the kind of core principles are the same, really, for the investors. They haven't really changed really what they're looking for. Basically great games. That's not going to change. So that's a good thing. As far as what they're looking for, I think the first thing I think is if you're a developer looking for investment, you have to decide what kind of investment you need. What are you looking for? Because the first thing is if you need to go out and look for investment, that's going to take time. That's going to take time for you. If you're a small company, it's going to take time for you as the person looking for the investment away from making the game and sorting that stuff out. So, the first thing is, do you need this investment? Can you do it just by bootstrapping, by making the game yourselves? Friends, family, fools is what they call the 3 Fs. Can you, beg, borrow, and steal?
Well, there's
Maybe not
another F that I
steel,
would
but
add. There's another F that I would normally add, but I'll leave it.
yeah, exactly. So, do you really need the investment first of all? Can you make the game without it? Because it will, ultimately you'll be in a stronger position if you can make the game without investment, because then you can pick and choose who you work with, and the risk will be a lot kind of smaller for publishers, but also you have more power because you've finished your game, and you can go and find whatever platform or publisher that you need. So the first thing is, do you need the investment first of all, I would say, because it just takes time out of your day. The second thing is, if you do need investment, what kind of investment is it? So do you need just money to make the game that you're making at the moment? Is it just that you need $50,000, $100,000 to make it? Is that what you're looking for? So is it project funding? Because that would mean that you would need to talk to publishers who can provide, platform holders that can maybe provide that funding, or angels, angel investors. If you're more interested in, well, I'm looking for a partner, I'm looking for equity investment, I'm looking for someone to invest in our company as well as in our suite of games, rather than just one game, then yeah, you can talk to VCs and VC investors, and again angels, and people that want to actually invest in your company, and then they'll be along for the ride, as well as just the current game that you're working on. They're looking for success from your company and grow your company over 5 to 10 years. So you just really have to kind of think carefully about what kind of investment that you really need at the moment, and put your focus into that, because there's so much around at the moment. I put a list of different types of investment around, and there's publishers, platform holders, VCs, there's public bodies, there's crowdfunding, debt financing, accelerators. There's all these different things, and it's like you can quickly get lost. You just need to work out what you need, and what type of funding that you need. That's sort of the first rule, really. And do you need it at all? Because it will be a distraction.
I think that is super smart. I think that one of the things I've learned over the last couple of years, again, as somebody who's switched from being a publisher to being an investor somewhat, and there is some subtle differences, right? I think developers really need to understand the difference between project financing, as you mentioned, which is basically having somebody come in and help fund that game. And that's generally either a publisher or platform holder. There are some investors and some VCs that will do project-based financing. Joystick is one of those that's rare VCs that's actually doing project. Most VCs and investors are taking equity. So if you're looking for equity, you need to understand that these people are looking for a business, not a project. Right? They're generally looking, now that one project can be the business, but in general, if I'm looking at basically buying and funding a piece of your studio, I'm expecting the studio to be a lot more than just one project. And so it's really the difference. Are you building a game or are you building a business? And I hope almost every developer out there steps back and realizes that they actually need to build a business to even build a game. Because if you don't plan on actually running a successful business, you probably aren't going to be able to finish the game and support it when it launches. I can tell you so many horror stories about the number of studios I know that got enough money to make the game and maybe get to launch, and then 3 months later they were out of business because they didn't take into account how long it actually starts to take money, how you have to keep updating it, how and that difference. So I think what you said is super important about where am I at in development? What do I actually need to finish this game properly? And oh, by the way, I need some runway after I launch this game so I have a chance of making money. And I think those are some things that a lot of developers fail to consider when they're going, oh, well, I just need money for the project. But like, how much money do you actually need? If you're self-publishing, have you thought about the actual publishing costs and QA, localization, ratings, like just some minimum amount that goes beyond the actual development budget? Some developers account for it, some don't. And I would suggest in general, especially if you're talking to publishers, but in general, even if you're talking to investors, breaking it out. So if you have an absolute number that you have in mind of the development budget you need to split out. If you've built in QA, localization, and ratings, list it separately. Because if it's a publisher, they're probably going to take care of all of that in-house. So they can deduct that from what you're asking for. If it's an investor, you probably need to make sure they're giving you that so you can actually finish the development. And then you probably want to take into account, especially if it's an investor, what is it going to actually take you for some minimum level of marketing and PR, right? We learned a long time ago that you can't just put a game up on Steam and hope it's going to be successful. Even some games that seem to have that happen have had a lot behind the scenes, the community management, some level of PR and marketing, distributing codes to influencers. All that takes time and money. And if you're a small studio and you don't plan and budget for it, you're going to get to the launch of your game and find nobody's there. It's like the whole tree falls in the forest. If a game launches on Steam and nobody's there to see it.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's something you should build into your development, is building the community. And I think what's important about that is that it's great because you're speaking to the community, getting feedback on the game, it's making your game better. But B, you're creating advocates and an audience for your game, and actually that will help you when you're looking for investment. If you go to a publisher or a VC and you can say, well, we're working on this game, we've got 10,000 active community people who just love our game and are involved in the making of it, and they're involved in our Steam early access or whatever you're doing, that will give confidence to the publisher or the platform holder that this game is going to sell, because at least they're going to it's going to go to those 10,000 people that love the game. So it's something that I always, when I'm talking to developers, that the marketing is such a major part of a game now, getting a game out there, because just making a good game now isn't enough. You've got to let people know about it, and involving the community and all that kind of stuff is just so important nowadays. It really is.
I couldn't agree more. Sure. One of the first things we looked at. Go ahead, guys. Sorry.
No, that's right. I was just going to jump in. We've got a couple of questions that are actually coming in.
Please, let's do the questions
from the chat. So, it's all good. This is great. I love the tangential directions that will go off as well. So this is perfect. This is exactly what we wanted.
Good.
And also for anyone that is actually watching on the Twitch or the YouTube or inside the Discord, in the Xsolla Diamond Club Discord, feel free to ask questions. I'm keeping an eye on it, and I'll bring them up as we have time. But there's a question here from Fubraco, I believe is their name or username. Just what are your thoughts on smaller but riskier investments? There's a lot of countries that have up-and-coming industries and really talented devs and teams, but they might still be learning. So the games might not sell that much, but they also need a considerable amount of investment, smaller amount of investment to make them when compared to countries with more established industries. Like, what do you guys think about that? Jamie?
Well, it's interesting. I was talking to some developers in Turkey quite recently, and I was chatting to them about the accelerator they've got in Turkey, and it's important that, I think, again, we were talking about online events. These events are giving access to these places that before would be off the beaten track and we wouldn't hear about them. And I think that we're hearing more and more from other countries, just not the traditional kind of UK and North America, whatever, that have these amazing industries, and that is where there's going to be some really exciting projects. I think most investors particularly don't really care where you're from or where what country where you're based or whatever. It's all about the game and the team. That's what I hear all the time is like the team of the developer. It's like, so when you're pitching, it's really important to get across any track record that you have in your team and any previous games that you've worked on and all that kind of stuff. Bring that all into the pitch, and that goes for developers in other countries as well, because they might be that you just come from nowhere and you just suddenly come up with this brilliant game, and and that's great, and investors will be interested, no doubt. It doesn't matter where you're from, but if you can also sort of talk about any experience that you've had previously on different games, whether it's a previous developer working on AAA or whether you're working on an indie or whatever, make sure that you build that into the pitch, and you talk about the team and what you've done together and how long you've been together, because that's really important. And I think publishers and VCs, all types of investors, they need to know that what they're investing in is going to be secure and that they're going to get a return on that investment.
Yeah, no, that's all great points. I'm gonna go back to something I said, because to the question about risk. Look, in general, investors are more risky than publishers. We know most publishers are fairly risk averse. Even nowadays with the indie publishers are going to be, because it's a whole different process. Investors by nature are gamblers to some extent, but we still like to mitigate that risk as much as possible. So in terms of priority, as Jamie said, it's all about the game. Like, first and foremost, nothing matters except the game, unless you're a team that's got a ton of experience. If you're a team that's got, and we're seeing this, all these people splitting out of Blizzard, splitting out of all these other studios that have a track record. Sure, if you've got that track record and I've got money to give, am I going to give it to a team that's got that track record? Maybe not on their own, but yes, that's a pretty secure, safe investment, because your belief is they'll find something that works. If you are a startup or a new studio, it becomes more and more important that your game is special, stands out, has something amazing, does something. And I'm not saying the entire game, by the way. Just do one thing better than somebody else. The things you can actually do to make your game more attractive when you're in this position is figure out who your competition is, right? Don't rely on me to tell you who your competition is. As an investor or a publisher, I'm going to do my own comps. I'm going to do my own analysis. But I expect you to know, okay, my consumer or the consumer for this game is currently playing this. This is my competition. This is why they might stop playing that to play my game. My game does X better, Y better, does this differently. But if you can't, I guess, elaborate and explain that to me as the developer of this content, who your audience is and why they're going to care, that's not my job. My job is to help them care, to market to them, to help you reach them. But my job, I'm not making the game. I can't make them care. So if you don't understand who your target market is and why they're going to care, it is a huge red flag. So as a startup developer or new developer from an emerging market, you really need to spend time, and this is where I say it's building a business. Who is the audience for my game? What price makes sense for my game? And again, the publisher or investor will help you with this, but you need to have an idea of, okay, in this genre with, 8 hours of gameplay, I can charge $20 for this game. But if you come to me with a 5-hour game and you say, and I'm a startup developer and I'm going to be able to charge $30, and I look at the genre and I'm going to scratch my head and go, you might not know what you're talking about from a business perspective, which then adds seeds of doubt from an investment perspective. And it sounds like I know you want to just focus on making the game. The reality is, though, you need to build a business, because I need to believe you can stay in business long enough to finish the game. Then I start looking at things like Jamie said, the team. Do I believe you actually can finish? Because this is where the 80-20 rule comes into play. It's 80% of the development can be done by a lot of people. It's that last 20% finishing the game, making sure everything works, making sure that I can get through QA, making sure if I'm going to console, I can get through lot check, right? That's actually where 80% of the work comes in, and that's where a lot of games completely fall apart. And so the more that risk can be mitigated, the more likely I am to be interested in signing the whole package. So this is where you really have to think, put yourself in the shoes of an investor who's investing in your project. If you haven't done anything together before, or this is your first game, how do you convince me that you're going to be able to finish? And that becomes really important if you want my money.
No, that's really good. That's really good advice. I hope that answers the question. Fubraco, I have one other question that I want to bring up from Matthew, who's asking, what is the appropriate way to tell a publisher or investor that you are also speaking to other parties? It seems wrong to not give them the opportunity to counter offer.
Jamie, do you want to go for it? I have my opinion, Doug, so I'm going to jump in. So look, just be careful how you do this. You absolutely should tell people that you're talking. And by the way, as an investor or publisher, if you have a good game, I'm just operate under the assumption that you're talking to more than one person. I would actually find it kind of a failure if you weren't. But be careful about being disingenuous about this. I can tell you I've had times when developers have tried to pressure me by saying, oh, well, I've got somebody else interested, and they've tried to leverage that to get a better deal or to do what else. And if that comes across as disingenuous or false, I start losing trust in you. right? And remember, this relationship is all about trust. And I used to say, I'd say, so as a publisher, you're moving in with somebody. It's not even dating. As a publisher, you're moving in with somebody and living with somebody.
Yeah.
As an investor, you're actually getting married. And so there is a difference. Both are investments, but one carries inherently a longer term commitment. But if you're asking me to move in with you, right, like it's a whole nother ball game. And so you need to be very careful about, like, if you start breaking that trust before I move in with you, or before I agree to move in with you, then the odds are I'm not going to move in with you. So absolutely mention you're talking to other people. If you're serious and you actually have another offer on the table, you can mention that you've got an offer that you're considering, but do not make that story up, because if I call your bluff and you can't verify it, and don't think we don't all know each other, right? Like, I know most of the publishers in the industry. I know most of the other investors. If I really think you're bluffing, I may call your bluff. And if you fail that, then not only did you not get that other person, you lost me, and there's a good chance I'm going to go tell my friends, don't trust these people. Right. So absolutely tell people, just you got to be honest about it. And you can say, look, I'm talking to these people. I've got 3 or 4 people that have said they're interested. That's fine. But if you start saying you have offers on the table, you don't have to tell me who, but you better have an offer on the table.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. And also, you should be talking to, lots of different publishers and platform holders. Don't just take the first offer you get. Perhaps, look at other opportunities. And I think one of the frustrating things I hear back from developers, from publishers and platform holders and investors, is sometimes when they don't hear anything, and it's like they don't get a yes, they don't get a no, they feel as though they're kind of being kept on on the line a little bit, and kind of and that can sometimes be frustrating. And I think sometimes
we call it the long maybe.
yeah, that's right. Good. And it's something where, as a developer, if you in that sort of situation, then you should be pitching to other companies, and don't wait for someone to make a decision. If you then go and have a good pitch and you get an offer, then you can maybe go back to the other publisher or someone who's keeping you on the line and say, hey, look, I've got an offer. Are you still interested? If not, see ya. And it's like, but you should always try and meet as many different types of publishers and people as possible. And before you sign anything, speak to a lawyer, get a good solicitor. To make sure they check the contracts and go over the small print, make sure that you get good returns, that there's all sorts of stuff where, you don't get paid until the money has been paid back to the publisher sometimes, and all sorts of kind of different ways that you will get your money. And it's important that you're very aware of that before you go into the contract. And, things like, getting a first dibs on a sequel or anything like that, with the publisher and that you've signed with. But yeah, just make sure that you speak to a solicitor before you sign anything.
Yeah, I can't agree with that more. That's so on point. And I also want to say that, remember that in general, right, unless you're just making one game and hoping to retire, you are planning to be in the industry a while. So be careful about burning bridges. This is all about building long-term relationships. There's people I met in this industry that I've known for 15 or 20 years, and a couple of them, like, I literally just signed my first actual deal with them a year or two ago, right? Like, it is about trust, long-term relationships. And a lot of times I'll see a game that I think is great. It's just not right for me right now. So it's about these relationships. It's about the trust. And look, we all use this. It's all about filters. The expression of it's not what you know, it's who you know. It's still accurate. Like, it's for me, it's not what you build. Well, it is what you build. But to get that in front of the right people quickly, it's also kind of who you know in those relationships. And so making sure that you establish those relationships, even if it's not this game, even if it's building that trust. Because I guarantee you, if I'm looking at a new developer and and I can go talk to a friend, and we all have tons of friends, whether it's Rami or Callum or somebody else who's dealt with you, and they put in a good word, that's going to move you higher on the, okay, I need to review this chart. I need to take this seriously. And I'm sorry to say this, but if somebody I don't know, never heard of, sends me a pitch, and I've got 10 pitches from friends that are people that I know, the people that I know are always going to move to the top because there's that trust there. It doesn't mean I won't look at this other pitch. So And there are a few developers, and I won't name them, and some of them are still around, some aren't, that have burned those bridges and then submitted pitches that I've really liked, but I haven't signed them because I don't trust them. And so it's just,
I think it's,
look, a lot of the people
yeah,
been around for a long time. Go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree, and I've heard horror stories of people kind of, you know, going into pitches and, you know, dissing someone from a previous company, and it's like, you know, he's a personal friend of mine, or she's a personal friend, and, you know, you just never do that, never get into personal kind of dissing certain companies or whatever when you're in pitches. I mean, that's a bit of a no-brainer, really. But what you were saying there about those sort of warm introductions, this is something that I think that it's been much harder to do virtually, because, you know, if I'm in a room with a bunch of investors, publishers, and developers, what I used to do as part of my job, I used to say, hey, you know, your game's great, you should speak to so-and-so, and go and grab them and bring them together, you know, and start kind of creating those chance moments and those opportunities for people to kind of mix and meet the people that they need to meet. And that has been, I know that, you know, Guy's done some brilliant stuff with Zoom, and, you know, getting these you know, get-togethers on Fridays and stuff, and getting random things where you're thrown into rooms together and try and create some of that serendipitous kind of moments that you get at real events, which is great, and it's been brilliant. But, you know, there's still, for me, you know, just being at an event and being able to go, oh, you should speak to so and so, and you should speak to them, and that's what we've kind of been missing quite a bit. And it's a thing that you can't recreate as easily, I think, online.
You can't. You absolutely can trust me.
Serendipity.
You absolutely, you absolutely can't. It's like, yeah. Go on, Justin.
I was going to say the serendipity, the organic networking. I call it the accidental deals. You know, and the friend emendations, right? Like, and we used to joke about this, you know, in the old days of GDC, it was the Fairmont pit. We'd all be sitting around after the GDC drinking. I'd be talking to a friend. They would know, somebody would walk up that they know and like, oh, have you met Justin? Hey, wait a second. You have a great game. Like that kind of stuff. It's still, as much as we try, it just doesn't happen as effectively or as efficiently doing it digitally. It just doesn't. I forget. I move on. Like, I'm on Zoom all day. I'm tired. I don't want to do anything else. I don't think of going, hey, well, God, you know, my buddy at so-and-so might really be interested in this game, right? It's way more removed versus if all, like, Jamie, that's one thing I loved about your event, because at the pitch sessions, right, we'd all be in this room together, and, you know, I may not have a meeting set up with the developer, and you're like, you know what? You really should talk to Justin. And even if we don't have a formal meeting there, just that introduction, that handshake, that, okay, you know, send me this pitch, I'll be on the lookout for it, means the world.
That's the difference that I think we try and make with the investment summit, in that I'm really kind of in amongst, you know, the coalface, really kind of helping the developers meet the publishers, and vice versa, you know. So I'll talk to the publishers and say, oh, we're looking for this sort of game on PC or whatever. So when I'm talking to developers, and I'll speak to someone and, oh yeah, we got this train sim or whatever, I'll go, oh, you just need to speak to so-and-so. And so that sort of personal touch is what we really try and do at the investment summit and at GI live events, you know, really try. And so, you know, when I get contacted by developers and say, look, I don't know if I've got any meetings, and I'll be look, we'll sort some meetings for you. I'll make sure we get some introductions for you, and I'll really try my damnedest to make sure that everybody gets some meetings on the day, because, you know, that's where we can make a difference. That's where we really make a difference, is doing those introductions and you know, creating those moments where they can suddenly, oh wow, yeah, we wouldn't have met this person, you know, and it's definitely resulted in deals and money being created through that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I could not agree more.
We've got about 10 minutes left here. This has been awesome, by the way.
Wow.
There's actually been a bunch of questions. Yeah, exactly. There's been a bunch of questions that have come up in the chat. I do want to say, for anyone that, you know, if you've got questions and we don't get to them, if you're in the Discord, if you're an Xsolla Diamond Club member, ask them in the Discord, and myself and Justin. Jamie is in there, and if you got time, Jamie, maybe you can see them and answer them as well.
I'll put some links in there, because there's some really good chats, and like we did a funding panel back in October that we recorded. It's online. It's just on the gamesindustry.biz YouTube channel, and there's some great stuff on there. There's like Cassia Curran did a great thing all about what stats and what information you should have in your pitches if you're pitching. So there's all sorts of, and it's free. It's online, So I'll put some links in on the Discord afterwards.
Yeah,
please,
fantastic.
Please
That'd be fantastic. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, that's what I mean. We tried to build Funding Club as a resource for developers, and it's really, I almost want to think of it as its own type of incubator accelerator, right? This is what it's all about, is just trying to give information to developers that's actually out there, but sometimes just figuring out where to go look for it, because there is a lot out there, and figuring out what you should be doing it's again, some of this is a full-time job, and if you're just trying to make a game, it's a lot of effort. So yeah, any links you want to share, Jamie, that point to stuff that you think. I remember watching parts of that talk. I love Cassia to death, so anything she does is amazing. So Guy, you said you have a few more questions maybe we can get to.
Yeah. I think we've probably got time for at least one. I do also want to note there was a great post from John in the Discord, and he said fast no's are better than long maybes, and I like that. I like that a lot.
Everything's better than a long maybe. I think it was almost 2.5 years ago. I kind of wrote the reason for a long maybe, and I'll sum it up really quickly here, just so developers understand. As a developer relations person, business development person for a publisher, or even an investor, there are a lot of people on the Greenlight Committee that actually have to say yes to a game. Right. So as the person, maybe I'm the tip of that spear bringing the games in, I'm going to be somewhat picky about the games that I bring in because it is a little bit of my reputation. But if there's a game that's on the fence, I may still bring it in because I don't want to be the one to pass up something that goes on to be a huge hit. I don't want to be the one explaining to my boss why I passed up on Fall Guys. I don't want to be the one explaining why I passed up on Rocket League or Valheim or whatever else, right? So if it's on the fence, or if it's pretty good, I'm not sure, I'll bring it in. There is enough people on that committee that have to say yes before the game gets signed. So if we sign a game that doesn't do well, there's plenty of blame to go around. So one of the reasons you get the long maybe is the game's good enough for me to bring in and take to people, but I don't get a consensus of a yes from everybody, and or I don't find the internal champion, like the producer that just loves it, that then goes around and lobbies for it and then gives it to Greenlight to get a full yes or no. So a lot of times these games sit in this kind of weird limbo where they're good enough to get looked at, but maybe they don't stand out so much that everybody jumps on board. And so I don't want to be the person to say no and lose my job a year from now. So I think that's one of the reasons for the long maybe. And in those cases, you can follow up with those folks. Give them a couple of weeks, go, hey, is there any more information you need? Can I provide any more data? Oh, by the way, here's an updated video. Oh, our wish list just grew by 10,000 last month because we put out, like, the more stuff you can do along the way to make them make a decision, the better. But this is one of the reasons for the long maybe. And look, I've been guilty of it. I can't tell you how many games I have actually given the long maybe. And it's because I'm not the one to say no necessarily, but I also can't get enough people to say yes. So just keep that in mind.
I like that. I like that. So there's one other question that I think if we can quickly address. It might be a quick answer. I don't know. But mass, the user's name is Mass Media Death, which God bless social media. But anyway, how many follow-ups is appropriate after chatting with a publisher and not hearing back? Like, and also, what are the best practices for cold outreach on social media, email, and not hearing back? I think the second part might be a longer explanation, but how many follow-ups is appropriate after chatting with a publisher and not hearing back, do you think? Jamie?
Well, I think it's a tricky one, really. I think it's well, I mean, personally, I would, not kind of keep at them and on, every day sending emails and sort of saying, when it's like if you send a follow-up after your meeting, in a couple of days, and then, you do a follow-up in, a week or two, and then another follow-up. I think it's quite reasonable to keep sort of asking, is there going to be a decision? I mean, if the publisher comes back and says, well, I've got a meeting in a month, it's nailing them down. It's saying, look, I'll come back to you in a month. So then put it in your diary, right, call so-and-so. He said a month, or she said a month. Go back and go, and find out what's happening. So I think it's making sure that when you're speaking to them, somehow it builds in a timeline. So if it's saying, oh, well, shall I get back to you at the end of the month, or shall I get back to you? So you've already planned in the next get back to them in a way.
So, Jay, yeah, I think you nailed. So one of the things I'm trying to get better at is whenever you're doing a pitch or a presentation, have an outcome in mind, right? So you generally are almost never going to get a yes on that pitch. I've been in like a handful of pitches in my life where literally before the pitch was even over, we said yes, right? But in general, you're almost never going to get a yes, we want this game during the pitch. So have in mind what you want to accomplish from that pitch, right? Is it to get that person interested? Is it to, and ask them, like, who does this have to go to? If you like the pitch, who does it have to go to? What is your green light process like? How long do you expect it to take to get it integrated? So if you get that information up front, it gives you really good guidelines on when to reach out and when to follow up. And by the way, like we used to do a formal green light when I was at 505 every 2 weeks. Right. And it would generally be 5 or 6 games. But sometimes 2 of those games would be like a huge discussion and take up the entire hour. The other 5 or 6 games would then get pushed. So sometimes your stuff just keeps getting pushed and kicked down the can. Right. So following up is always good. Just always try to get, and understand that the people on the other side, the biz dev people generally love games. They love indie games. They're doing their best, but they've got competing pressures. But so part of the thing is just ask them how often is appropriate. Ask them like, hey, do you mind if I follow up with you in a couple of weeks? When is your next green light? And then for the cold outreach, that is a whole nother story. And that is both an art and a science and can be your death if you do it wrong.
That's it's very, very tricky, that one, I think. You've just got to make sure that you don't annoy people, because I've heard if you're contacting a certain person on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, everything, and you're asking the same thing because you're not hearing back, it can quickly get annoying. So you just got to find that balance.
Yeah, there's a fine line between persistence and annoyance, right? Like,
yes.
Awesome. No, that's great. And actually, they responded in the chat, and they were like, "Great points. Thanks. It confirms how we've been going about it, but we didn't want to break some secret rule. So much appreciated." That's fantastic.
So the not so secret rules: don't be an ass. Right, like even if you have an investor or publisher that was just kind of a jerk, and sometimes, by the way, I've been guilty of it. Like I've looked at an email I sent a month later and gone, that was kind of harsh. Like, don't be an ass. Just like accept it and go, okay, unless it's something just totally crosses the line that's out of bounds. Like just move on and focus. Again, so many of us have been in the industry for a long time. Most of the people doing business development, developer relations even for the funds, for the developer, for the publishers, we've all been doing this for quite a while, whether it's 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. A lot of us know each other. There is no like Illuminati back channel where we're all going, oh, we don't like this developer, never sign them. Believe it or not, that doesn't happen. But I can tell you there are some developers that have burned enough bridges where we're like, I don't know if I'd want to work with them, right? And so just be cognizant of it. And I'm not saying it's fair, but this is the way it is in every business I've ever been in. Anybody's been outside the industry, right? Like it never pays to be an ass.
Yeah, and also just remember that people are doing jobs and we don't know everything. It's like. They might turn down your game and it's a huge mistake. It's like a game will come along, Power Wash Simulator, where you think, how is this going to be popular? And it's like, people, we're all in our jobs, we're all winging it to a certain extent. So it's like we don't know everything. So if someone turns down your game, don't take it as like, oh well, that's it, our game's rubbish. It's certainly not the case. And don't get that as a knockback, because ultimately we don't know everything, and there could be some, your game could be the next big thing and someone just doesn't know it.
The longer I've done this, the longer I've done this, the more I realize I know actually almost nothing. And I can say this with the decent, I can generally, so here's the problem, is I can generally look at a pitch, and it's not even the game itself, but I can look at a pitch and look at the developer and go, they're really going to struggle having success. And sometimes I can separate the developer from the pitch or combine them, and I can go, okay, this is going to struggle. They need a lot of help. But what's good and what looks like it has an opportunity to what's great and does really well, I'm going to give you a little secret. Almost nobody can tell that. Like almost nobody's got that crystal ball, right? We can look at stuff and go, okay, this has a shot of being really good, right? But nobody really knows, because that's up to the consumers. That's up to the developer, the consumer. There's so many things that have to go right for a game to be a huge success, right? Yeah. So none of us really, like, there's no magic formula here, right? There's no, like, I'm going to add 2 parts of this, 1 part of this, 3 parts of this. So all of us are guessing, and this is what you need to understand. But we are taking educated guesses, and there are some red flags. And the more you can look to avoid those red flags, the more you're likely to move on to, okay, this game has a chance.
I love it. I think this is a great parting message, which is none of us actually really know what we're doing. But look, this has been, we're pretty much at the hour, and this has been great. It's taken so many different turns and great answers to questions that have actually come from the people watching. So we're going to wrap it up. Thanks so much for your time, Justin, as always. Jamie, thank you so much for joining. Jamie, do you want to actually tell the people what you've got going on at the moment before we sign out for the last time?
Well, in Yorkshire and Northern England, we've got events going on. We've got an event tomorrow supporting the Yorkshire Games Festival, which is going to be fun. We've got an event in Salford near Manchester next week. As far as gamesindustry.biz, we've got some exciting events coming up. We're doing some online stuff. We're doing GI Live investment summits and investment events and business events in London, and hopefully in the US again as well very soon. So yeah, I'll keep you posted on that.
Yeah, Jamie, if you want to share a link to, like, the calendar or whatever in the Discord, feel free.
Yeah, sure. And I'll keep updated. As soon as we've got information on any GI dates that are in the diary, I'll be able to give you them, so you can put them into the Discord and let the Xsolla folks know.
Greatly appreciate it. And by the way, thanks for spending so much time with us. I know it's actually late there, so I really appreciate you taking time out of dinner time or pub o'clock, as I like to call it.
This is vodka, so it's fine.
Awesome. All right. Excellent. Again, thank you so much, everyone, and I will hopefully talk to you and see you again soon. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Cheers, everyone.